The Valorian Empire was famous across the galaxy for its beauty, wealth, and strict traditions. Its floating cities shone like jewels in space, and its royal bloodline was said to be older than many stars. But behind the golden halls and soft lights, fear ruled quietly. Princess Sailira of Valoria stood alone on the high balcony of the royal palace, looking down at the capital city. Her hands were folded tightly in front of her, claws hidden inside silk gloves. Below her, ships moved in slow lines, and the distant sound of the city reached her ears like a quiet ocean. To anyone watching, she looked calm. Inside, her thoughts were heavy. The royal council would meet in less than 1 hour. She already knew what they would say. They had said it many times before. You must marry, not for love, not for happiness, only for power. Sailira was the only daughter of the late emperor. Since his death, the council ruled in his place, waiting for the moment she married a noble strong enough to guide her. That noble was Lord Carex, a powerful figure from one of the oldest houses. He was respected, feared, and completely loyal to tradition. Sailira hated him. She had met Carex only twice, but that was enough. He spoke to her as if she were a fragile object, something to be owned and used. He never asked her opinion. He never listened. To him, she was a symbol, not a person. A soft sound came from behind her. She turned to see her closest aide, Lyrian, entering the balcony. Lyrian's feathers were dark with worry, her eyes sharp. They are gathering, Lyrian said quietly. This time they will not accept delay. Sailira nodded. I know. Lyrian hesitated, then lowered her voice. There is another option, one the council will not expect. Sailira turned fully now. Say it. Lyrian stepped closer. If you are already married, they cannot force another match. Sailira let out a slow breath. You know they would never accept. Unless, Lyrian interrupted gently, the marriage is legal, public, and impossible to undo without causing political chaos. Sailira stared at her. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moving across the balcony. You have someone in mind, Sailira said. Yes, Lyrian replied. A foreigner, a neutral party, someone with no ties to Valorian noble houses. Sailira's eyes widened slightly. That would be an insult to the council. Exactly. Silence followed again. Then, slowly, Sailira's lips curved into a small, dangerous smile. Find them, she said. Far from Valoria, on the edge of disputed space, a human ship drifted near a broken moon. Inside, Ethan Cole cleaned his rifle with slow, practiced movements. His armor was old but well cared for, marked with scratches from many battles. He moved calmly, like someone who had learned long ago that panic never saved lives. Ethan was a soldier, but not for any flag. He worked contract missions now, choosing carefully, protecting civilians, escorting ships, ending fights before they grew into wars when possible. His ship's communication panel lit up. This is an encrypted channel, a voice said. You are being contacted by a private client. Ethan frowned. I don't take mystery jobs. This one pays well, the voice replied, and it prevents a war. That caught his attention. Minutes later, a hologram formed in the center of the ship. Lyrian appeared, standing straight, her feathers arranged formally. I speak for Princess Sailira of the Valorian Empire, she said. She requires a human soldier. For what? Ethan asked. Lyrian paused, choosing her words carefully. Marriage, Ethan blinked. Come again. The marriage would be legal, Lyrian continued quickly. Public, but temporary. You would be her husband in name only. Your role would be to stand beside her, protect her, and give the council no legal way to force another union. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. You aliens really don't do things halfway, do you? This arrangement would prevent a civil conflict, Lyrian said. And protect millions. Ethan looked at the hologram, his expression serious now. He had seen what power struggles did to innocent people. He had buried enough victims of politics. What's the risk? He asked. You would become a target, Lyrian answered honestly. Many will hate you, some will try to kill you. Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. That's already my job. There was a pause. Then Lyrian added, the princess insists you must agree freely. No threats, no lies. Ethan stood up and walked toward the small window of his ship, looking out at the stars. A fake husband, an alien empire, a political storm. He thought of the refugees he had escorted last year, of the cities burned because leaders wanted more power. Send me the details, he said at last. I'll do it. When Ethan arrived on Veloria, the capital stopped breathing. Human ships were rare there. A human soldier stepping onto royal ground was unheard of. Ethan walked through the palace gates wearing simple armor and no weapons visible, as requested. He moved with confidence but not arrogance. Guards watched him closely, expecting weakness or aggression. They found neither. Princess Selyra waited in the central hall. She wore ceremonial white, her posture perfect, her expression controlled. When she saw Ethan, something inside her shifted. He was taller than most Valorians, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes that had seen real war. He did not stare at her like an object. He bowed slightly with respect, not submission. "Princess," he said simply. "Ethan Cole," she replied. "Thank you for coming." Their eyes met. For a brief moment the noise of the hall faded. He was not what she expected. The council entered soon after, their robes heavy with symbols of power. When they saw Ethan standing beside the princess, whispers spread like fire. "A human! This is an insult. This cannot be allowed." Selyra raised her voice, calm and clear. "Honored counselors, I present my lawful husband." Shock rippled through the hall. Ethan stepped forward and spoke before anyone could stop him. "I am Ethan Cole," he said. "Human, soldier. I entered this marriage by choice. I will protect my wife and this empire from harm." Some counselors laughed, others looked furious. Lord Carrex's eyes burned with anger. "A temporary trick," Carrex said. "This will not stand." Selyra met his gaze without fear. "The law says otherwise." Silence fell. For the first time in years, the council had no immediate answer. As guards escorted Ethan to his assigned chambers later, Selyra watched from the shadows of the hall. Her heart was racing, not with fear, but with something else she did not yet understand. The plan had worked. But she could not shake the feeling that her life had just changed forever. And so had his. Morning light filtered through the tall crystal windows of the palace, casting soft colors across the marble floor. Ethan Cole woke early, as he always did. Years of soldier life had trained his body to rise before danger did. He sat up on the edge of the bed, listening. The palace was quiet but not peaceful. He could hear guards changing shifts outside his chamber. Soft footsteps, whispered voices, too many pauses. Too much tension. They were watching him. Ethan stood, pulled on his simple clothes, and rolled his shoulders. He was unarmed by palace rules, but his body itself was a weapon. Calm, controlled, ready. A knock came at the door. "Enter," he said. The door slid open and two guards stepped in. Behind them stood Lyrian. Her feathers were neat, but her eyes showed strain. "The council requests your presence," she said. Ethan nodded. "Let me guess, they're not happy." Lyrian gave a small, tired smile. "That is one way to say it." They walked through long halls filled with statues of past rulers. Alien nobles stopped their conversations as Ethan passed. Some stared openly. Others looked away with clear disgust. A few looked afraid. That surprised him. In the council chamber, the air was heavy. The elders sat in a wide circle, their faces cold. Lord Carrex stood near the center, arms crossed. "So," Carrex said, his voice sharp, "the human survives his first night." Ethan met his gaze without blinking. "I usually do." A murmur spread through the chamber. "This palace is not a battlefield," one counselor snapped. "Watch your tone." "With respect," Ethan replied calmly. "I will speak honestly. That is how humans show respect." Princess Selyra sat at the high seat, silent. Her posture was straight, but her hands were clenched. She watched everything. Carrex stepped forward. "This marriage is an insult to our bloodline, a temporary trick. The human will be gone soon. Ethan turned slightly toward Lyra, then back to the council. I signed a legal contract recognized by your law. I intend to honor it fully. And what does that mean? Another counselor asked. It means, Ethan said, I will protect my wife. I will not interfere in your politics, and I will not be intimidated. The chamber went quiet. Karex laughed softly. Brave words from an unarmed human. Ethan smiled just a little. If you think weapons make strength, you've never met humans in a bad situation. That earned a few uncomfortable looks. The council dismissed him soon after, unsatisfied but unable to act. As Ethan left, he felt eyes on his back. Hatred, curiosity, calculation. Outside the chamber, Lyra caught up to him. You spoke boldly, she said. I meant every word, he replied. If that causes trouble, I'll handle it. She studied his face. You do not fear them. I respect power, Ethan said, but I don't worship it. Something softened in her expression. The trouble started that same day. It began small. Servants delayed his meals. Guards forgot to escort him. Doors closed just before he reached them. Then came the tests. In the training courtyard, palace guards practiced combat. Ethan watched quietly from the side. A captain noticed him and smirked. Human, the captain called. Care to join us, or are you only brave with words? Several guards laughed. Ethan stepped forward calmly. Rules. Non-lethal, the captain said. Alien versus human, Ethan nodded. That's fine. The duel lasted less than a minute. The captain was strong and fast but predictable. Ethan dodged, redirected, and used the alien's weight against him. The captain hit the ground hard, stunned. The courtyard fell silent. Ethan offered a hand to help the captain up. The captain hesitated, then took it. From the balcony above, Lyra watched, her heart pounding. She had expected violence. Instead, she saw control, respect, restraint. That night, the first real attack came. Ethan was walking back to his chambers when the lights dimmed suddenly. He stopped instantly. His senses sharpened. Movement. He turned just as a blade flashed toward his neck. He caught the attacker's wrist, twisted, and slammed them into the wall. Another came from behind. Ethan ducked, rolled, and knocked them down. More footsteps, too many. A door burst open nearby. Ethan, Lyra's voice. He turned sharply. She was standing in the corridor, unguarded. Get back, he shouted. One attacker lunged toward her. Ethan moved without thinking. He placed himself between Lyra and the blade, taking the strike across his arm. Pain flared, but he did not fall. He struck back hard, disabling the attacker. Guards arrived moments later, weapons raised. The attackers were gone. Blood dripped from Ethan's arm. Lyra stared at him, shaking. You're hurt. It's nothing, he said, though his arm burned. She grabbed his sleeve. You stepped in front of me. That's the job, he replied simply. No, she said softly. You could have moved me. You chose to take the strike. Ethan met her eyes. I won't let anyone harm you. For the first time, Lyra felt fear not for herself, but for him. Word of the attack spread quickly. Officially, it was called an incident. Unofficially, everyone knew what it was. A warning. Instead of retreating, Ethan became more visible. He trained palace guards in human tactics. He helped engineers reinforce weak points in the palace. He spoke to servants by name. This confused the nobles. Humans were supposed to be selfish, violent, short-sighted. Ethan was none of those things. One evening, Lyra invited him to walk with her in the inner gardens. Bioluminescent plants glowed softly around them. You are changing things, she said quietly. I'm just doing what makes sense, Ethan replied. The council fears you. That wasn't the plan, he said, but I won't apologize for existing. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Why did you agree to this? Ethan thought for a moment. Because I've seen what happens when people lose their choices, and because you asked honestly. Lyra lowered her gaze. I hired you to pretend. And, he asked. She looked up again, her voice steady but her eyes uncertain. And now I am no longer sure what is pretend. Their moment was broken by alarms. Red light flooded the garden. "Attack at the outer gate," a voice echoed. Ethan's body tensed instantly. "Stay here." "No," Scifi said firmly. "I will not hide." They reached the walls together. Supremacist banners burned in the distance. The city was under threat. Ethan took command without hesitation, coordinating defenses with calm authority. Guards followed him without question. Scifi watched him lead and realized something frightening. The human soldier did not act like a hired shield. He acted like he belonged. As the night burned on, the Empire learned its first hard lesson. The human husband was not weak. And he was not leaving. The attack at the outer gate was pushed back before dawn, but the damage it left behind was deeper than broken walls. Smoke still rose from distant buildings as the palace slowly returned to quiet. Guards moved through the halls with sharper eyes. Servants whispered more than usual. The Empire felt different now. Ethan had not slept. He stood in the command room studying a holographic map of the capital. His arm was bandaged from the earlier wound, but he ignored the dull pain. His focus was elsewhere. "These routes were used by the attackers," he said calmly, pointing. "They knew the patrol schedule. That means inside help." The alien commanders exchanged uneasy looks. Princess Scifi stood beside him, her expression serious. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet," Ethan replied. "But I can predict the next move." Lord Carrex sat across the room, silent, his eyes sharp. "You assume much, human." Ethan turned to face him slowly. "I assume someone benefits from chaos." Carrex smiled thinly. "Careful. Accusations without proof are dangerous." "So is doing nothing," Ethan answered. The meeting ended without agreement. Politics moved slower than war. Later that day, Scifi called Ethan to her private chamber. The room was large but simple, designed more for duty than comfort. She stood near the window, watching the city. "You challenged the council again," she said. "They needed to hear it," Ethan replied. She turned toward him. "You are making powerful enemies." "I already had them," he said. "Now they just show their faces." There was a pause. "Why are you still here?" Scifi asked quietly. "You have done enough. You could leave and still be paid." Ethan met her gaze. "Because the threat isn't over, and because if I leave now, they'll come for you harder." Her voice softened. "This was never meant to be your war." Ethan shrugged slightly. "Wars don't ask permission." For a moment, neither spoke. The space between them felt heavy, filled with things neither was ready to say. The council made its next move 3 days later. A formal summons was issued, calling for a public examination of the marriage. The claim was simple. The union violated sacred tradition and threatened imperial stability. The hearing would be broadcast across the empire. "This is a trap," Lyrian said urgently. "They want to humiliate you, to force the princess to renounce you." Ethan nodded. "I know," Scifi's jaw tightened. "I will not renounce him." "Even if it costs you the throne?" Lyrian asked. Scifi did not hesitate. "Then the throne is not worth keeping." The day of the hearing arrived. The grand forum was filled with nobles, officials, and observers from other worlds. Screens hovered in the air, transmitting every word. Scifi entered first, dressed in royal blue. She walked with steady steps, her head high. Ethan followed at her side, wearing simple formal attire. No armor, no weapons. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "A human. This is disgraceful. He dares stand there." The lead counselor spoke loudly. "Princess Scifi, you are charged with violating sacred law by binding yourself to a lesser species for political gain." Murmurs filled the hall. Scifi stepped forward. "I bound myself by choice." The counselor turned to Ethan. "Human, do you deny this union is a trick?" Ethan spoke clearly. "I deny that it is false." Laughter broke out. "Then prove it," Lord Carrex said smoothly. "By alien custom, a true bond requires shared risk, shared sacrifice." Scifi stiffened. She knew this custom. It was dangerous. Ethan looked at her. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, alarms blared. An explosion rocked the far side of the forum. Screams erupted. Smoke filled the air. It's an attack, someone shouted. Chaos spread instantly. Ethan reacted without thought. He grabbed Celira's hand and pulled her behind a fallen pillar. Debris rained down. This was planned, Ethan muttered. They want blood on camera. Armed attackers flooded the hall, wearing the same supremacist symbols as before. Guards fought back, but confusion slowed them. Ethan scanned the area. Stay here. No, Celira said firmly. If I hide, they win. Another blast shook the floor. Ethan made a decision. He stepped out into open view, placing himself between the attackers and the princess. The cameras caught everything. Follow me, he shouted to the guards. They did. Ethan moved fast, directing defenders, closing gaps, pulling civilians to safety. He took hits meant for others. He never ran. Celira watched from behind cover, fear and pride twisting together inside her. This was not acting. This was devotion. At one point, an attacker broke through and rushed towards Celira. Ethan saw it too late. Celira moved first. She grabbed a fallen energy rod and struck the attacker with all her strength. The blow knocked the weapon from his hands. Guards finished the job seconds later. Ethan stared at her. You could have been killed. So could you, she replied, breathing hard. Yet you keep stepping forward. Their eyes locked. The attack ended as suddenly as it began. The attackers were defeated or fled. The forum lay damaged but standing. The cameras were still recording. The lead counselor rose shakily. This hearing is postponed. No, Celira said loudly. The crowd turned toward her. She stepped into the center of the hall, her voice clear despite the smoke. You demanded proof of our bond. She reached for Ethan's hand. He took it. You just witnessed it. Silence fell. Across the empire, billions watched a human bleed for an alien princess, and an alien princess stand and fight beside him. That night, Ethan sat alone in his chamber, his injuries treated. Exhaustion pressed down on him. A soft knock came. Celira entered. I broke tradition today, she said quietly. You saved lives, Ethan replied. That matters more. She sat across from him. The council will not forgive this. I know, he said. They may strip me of power or worse. Ethan stood. Then I will take you somewhere safe. She looked up sharply. You would abandon everything. I never wanted power, he said, only to protect what matters. Her voice trembled slightly. And what matters to you? Ethan hesitated, then spoke honestly. You do. The room went very still. Celira stood slowly, closing the distance between them. Ethan, this was meant to be pretend. I know, he said softly. But when I saw you today, she continued, I realized something terrifying. What? I would rather lose the throne than lose you. Ethan reached out, resting his forehead gently against hers. Then whatever comes next, we face it together. Outside the palace, shadows moved. Plans formed. The failed trap had only made the enemies more desperate. But inside, something unbreakable had begun to form. The fake marriage was no longer just a shield. It was a choice. The Empire did not sleep after the attack on the Grand Forum. Across Valoria, news spread fast. Screens replayed the same moments again and again. Explosions, panic, a human soldier standing in front of an alien princess, bleeding but unyielding. An alien princess striking back, refusing to kneel. For some, it was shocking. For others, it was hope. For the old powers, it was unforgivable. By morning, the council issued an emergency decree. Princess Celira's authority was temporarily restricted for her own safety. Additional guards were placed around her chambers. Travel was forbidden. Messages were monitored. Protection, they called it. Ethan called it a cage. He stood outside her door, arms crossed, jaw tight, watching guards he did not trust. Inside, Celira paced slowly, trying to control her thoughts. They are moving carefully, she said when Ethan was allowed inside. That means they are afraid. They should be, Ethan replied. But fear makes people reckless. She stopped pacing. I am done being careful. He studied her face. She was tired, but her eyes were clear. Stronger than before. What are you thinking? He asked. I am thinking, she said, that if they want to strip my power quietly, I will force them into the open. Ethan's brow furrowed. How? I will address the Empire directly. That got his full attention. They'll try to stop you. Then they will show everyone who they really are. Within hours, Scifi's intention leaked. Supporters across the capital began to gather in public squares. Not nobles, not council members, citizens, workers, soldiers, mixed species, humans too. Ethan watched the feeds with surprise. He had not realized how far the impact had spread. They're choosing you, he said quietly. Sci shook her head. They are choosing a future. The council reacted exactly as expected. That night, palace power flickered. Communications went dark. Sirens wailed through the lower city. Lyrian burst into the room. The supremacist faction has seized the western defense platforms, she said urgently. They are declaring Sci unfit to rule. A coup, Ethan said flatly. Yes, Lyrian replied. And they are blaming humans for destabilizing the Empire. Sci closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them, her voice was steady. Then we stop pretending this is politics. Ethan nodded. I'll rally who I can. What about you? Lyrian asked Sci. If you flee, you might survive. Sci shook her head. If I flee, the Empire dies the slow way, I will stay. Ethan stepped closer to her. Then I stay too. They moved fast. Ethan took control of the palace defense network with the help of loyal engineers. He reopened old systems, rerouted power, and armed defensive drones that had been deactivated decades ago due to tradition. Tradition doesn't stop missiles, he muttered. Outside the palace, fighting broke out between loyalist guards and supremacist forces. Streets burned. Ships clashed above the city. Sci refused to hide. She moved to the command hall and began coordinating evacuations. She spoke calmly, clearly to governors and generals alike. She did not shout. She did not panic. They listened. Word spread that the princess was still standing, still leading. That mattered. During the second night of fighting, a message broke through the noise. Outer civilian sector is surrounded, a commander reported. Too many non-combatants, we can't hold. Ethan leaned over the map. That sector is a trap, they want to force us to choose. Sci looked at the glowing area. Millions lived there. No, she said, they want us to abandon them. Ethan met her eyes. Then we don't. He assembled a mixed unit, palace guards, volunteers, and human contractors who had stayed after the attack. No one questioned his command now. They moved into the sector under fire. Ethan led from the front, directing movement, covering civilians, breaking through blockades with precision. He did not act like a conqueror. He acted like a shield. At one point, a transport overloaded with refugees stalled under enemy fire. Panic spread. Ethan ran straight into it. He manually rerouted power, ignoring the explosions around him. When the transport lifted off safely, cheers broke out across the channel. Sci watched from the command hall, heart in her throat. She wanted to order him back. She didn't. She trusted him. Hours later, a message arrived that shattered her calm. Ethan is down. Her world narrowed instantly. She ran. They found him near a collapsed building, bloodied but conscious, having dragged 2 injured civilians to safety before finally falling. Medics worked quickly, lifting him onto a stretcher. Sci knelt beside him, uncaring of cameras, guards, or tradition. You are not allowed to die, she said, her voice breaking. Ethan managed a weak smile. That wasn't the plan. Tears burned her eyes. She did not wipe them away. The image spread everywhere. An alien princess kneeling in the ruins, holding the hand of a human soldier. The war changed after that. Loyal systems declared support openly. Even some council members defected, unable to ignore the will of the people. The supremacist leaders grew desperate. They made one final move, a strike on the palace itself. As enemy ships descended, Sci stood in the throne chamber, wearing her armor openly for the first time. Not ceremonial, functional. Ethan stood beside her, wounded arm supported, weapon in hand. "This ends tonight," he said. "Yes," she replied, "one way or another." The battle was brutal but short. Palace defenses held. The last supremacist ship was disabled above the capital, captured instead of destroyed. When silence finally fell, the city was damaged but alive. The council chambers reopened the next day. This time, the seats were not filled by elders alone. Representatives from across the empire stood beside them. Selyra walked in, Ethan at her side. No one tried to stop them. Lord Carex was brought forward in restraints. His face was cold, but his eyes showed fear. "You accused us of violating tradition," Selyra said, her voice carrying through the hall. "Yet you betrayed the empire itself. You corrupted it," Carex spat, "with weakness." "With unity," Selyra replied. "With choice." She turned to the assembly. "This war was not started by humans, it was started by fear." Silence followed. Then one by one voices rose: agreement, support, resolve. The old council was dissolved that day, not by force, by decision. Later, as the city began to heal, Selyra stood on the same balcony where it had all begun. The view was darker now, scarred but real. Ethan joined her, moving slowly. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you," he replied. They stood together, watching ships repair the skyline. "The fake marriage saved my throne," Selyra said quietly, "but it also changed everything." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, it did." She turned toward him. "The Empire will demand answers soon about us." He met her gaze. "Then we give them the truth." Her lips curved into a soft, genuine smile. "I am no longer afraid." Neither was he, but beyond the stars others were watching too. And not all of them were ready to accept what Valoria had become. The morning sun rose over Valoria, soft and golden, painting the city in light that made its scars less obvious. Buildings still bore marks from battle. Streets smelled of smoke and wet stone. But the people walked with purpose, moving with renewed confidence. Life had returned, not as before, but stronger. Princess Selyra stood on the balcony of the royal palace, the breeze lifting her hair. Ethan was beside her, moving slowly, his arms still bandaged but improving. She did not speak at first, just watched the citizens below. Children ran through streets once shadowed by fear. Merchants reopened their stalls. Guards patrolled with steady eyes rather than nervous tension. "The Empire is waking up," Ethan said quietly. "Yes," Selyra replied. "And we survived what many thought would destroy us." Ethan's gaze shifted to the horizon. People believed they were powerless, but the choice to fight or stand together made all the difference. Selyra turned to him. "You stood beside me when it mattered most. Not because of duty, not for reward, but because you chose to." He shrugged faintly. "Humans have a habit of choosing what matters. It doesn't matter if they're expected to." She studied him. There was truth in those words, deeper than any law or tradition could hold. And she realized then that the empire had not only survived because of her leadership or his skill, it had survived because of them, together. The council chambers reopened fully for the first time since the war. The new assembly was a mix of old leaders, citizens, representatives, and delegates from distant planets allied with Valoria. For the first time in centuries, decisions would be based not only on bloodline and tradition, but also on merit, courage, and choice. Selyra entered with Ethan by her side, not as a protected princess or a contract-bound spouse, but as a sovereign leader and her chosen partner. Murmurs swept through the hall as delegates whispered among themselves. Humans had never held such presence in Valoria's core politics, and now one stood openly beside its ruler. The lead delegate rose, his voice calm but filled with tension. "Princess Selyra, the Empire watches. How will you lead? And what of this human union?" Selyra took a deep breath. "I will lead with vision, courage, and fairness. And this union is not a political tool, it is a choice. My people and the galaxy will see that strength is not measured by species, tradition, or fear. Strength is measured by loyalty, by courage, and by the willingness to stand for what is right." Ethan squeezed her hand, steadying her as he had in countless battles. She looked at him, her heart swelling. "And," she continued, "I will not allow fear to dictate our future. We will rebuild, we will unite, and we will show that Valoria's greatness comes not from isolation, but from embracing those who fight beside us." A long pause followed. Then, slowly, delegates began to nod. Whispers turned into voices of agreement. Some skeptics remained, but many realized that the future of the empire had changed, whether they liked it or not. Lord Carex, who had survived the last battle and had been taken into custody, looked at Saylyra with something like defeat in his eyes. "You think this will last?" he asked, bitterness dripping from his words. "It will," Saylyra replied simply, "because it is not built on fear, obedience, or coercion. It is built on trust, respect, and choice, something you never understood." Carex said nothing more. Guards led him away quietly. After the assembly, Saylyra and Ethan returned to the balcony. Below, the citizens celebrated, not in frivolity but in relief and determination. The city had survived. The empire had survived. And now it had a new truth to guide it. "I never imagined it would be like this," Saylyra said softly. "I thought a contract would save my throne. I did not expect it to save so much more." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's never just contracts, Princess. It's choices. Every human I've ever known, we decide who we stand with." Her eyes softened. "And you chose me." "I did," he said simply. "Every time, and I would again." They stood side by side, feeling the wind carry the scent of the repaired city below. The stars began to appear in the fading light, distant and steady, like silent witnesses to all that had happened. Days passed and the empire slowly recovered. Trade resumed. Cities rebuilt. Diplomats from neighboring worlds arrived, curious about Valoria's new leadership and the unusual alliance it now embodied. Humans were no longer outsiders. They were allies, respected and trusted because of one soldier who had stood where many would have fled. Saylyra took her place as Empress fully, not by bloodline alone, but because she had proven herself as a leader willing to fight for justice, for life, and for unity. The old council dissolved completely, replaced by a system that valued competence and integrity. Ethan was offered titles, command, and authority in the new regime. He declined most of it. He did not care for power. He only asked to remain by Saylyra's side, as her partner, as her equal, and as her chosen companion. "I don't need a title," he said when the offer was made. "I just need to stand where I can do the most good. And that is beside me," Saylyra said, taking his hand in hers. "Yes," he replied. For the first time, they walked through the palace corridors without fear or pretense. Guards saluted them with respect, citizens cheered them openly, and even the walls seemed lighter, freed from the tension of suspicion and fear. The fake marriage had ended months ago in truth, though no one had needed formal declarations. It had never been fake in their hearts. What had begun as a contract had grown into trust, loyalty, and something deeper than either of them had expected. At night, they would stand on the balcony together, watching stars and sharing quiet words. Ethan would tell stories of human worlds, of battles fought and civilians saved. Saylyra would speak of her people, their culture, and her hopes for the empire. Together, they envisioned a galaxy that could respect strength without fear, unity without domination, and love without boundaries. Months later, during the first council assembly under the new leadership, Saylyra formally declared her marriage to Ethan as permanent. The announcement was not political theater, it was truth. Citizens across the empire celebrated, not just for their rulers, but for the example they set, that courage, loyalty, and choice could overcome centuries of fear and prejudice. The galaxy began to shift its perspective. Humans were no longer strangers or weak outsiders. They were respected because one human had shown what was possible: bravery, integrity, and heart. Saylyra looked at Ethan as the council members nodded and offered their support. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried humility and quiet pride. "We did it together, and we will continue together," she said, squeezing his hand. He nodded. "Always." The empire had survived wars, betrayals, and fear. It had survived because of leadership, courage, and the choice to stand beside each other. Humans had become a part of the Valorian story, not as conquerors, but as equals, as partners, and as heroes. And for Celira and Ethan, what had begun as a simple contract had become a lifetime of trust, respect, and love. They had not only changed the future of a galaxy, they had changed each other. On that balcony, under the glow of 1,000 stars, the princess and the soldier stood together, ready for whatever came next, knowing that the strongest bond in the universe was not built by law or tradition, it was built by choice. And they had chosen each other. The empire, the galaxy, and their hearts had never been stronger.